Well, I will go ahead and get started. Obviously, we were hoping for more people, and we think that there are people coming off the practice field or getting off of work or whatever they got going on for their daily lives. But we'll go ahead and get started and add people as the evening goes along. But just wanted to thank everybody for joining us here on a very unusual meeting that we would like to have. And hopefully tonight we can give you as much insight and information as possible so that you can take this and be educated as you move into the new norm. So for those of you that don't know, I'm the athletic director, Paul Polinsky, and joining with me in an official capacity this evening is Jackie Walgren, our Deputy Director of Athletics, our Senior Woman Administrator, and our Compliance Officer. In addition to her is Sean Devine, who is the Coordinator of Student Athlete Services. In addition to that is Devin Hart, our Director of Sports Medicine. Manny Reich, our Associate Athletic Director, and Dax Larson, our Associate Athletic Director, are also with us. And we know we have a bunch of coaches that are visiting as well. But we do have you all on mute right now. We do ask that as we move throughout the presentation tonight, that we'd ask that you would ask us questions if you would like to. You can use the chat feature, which is in your browser there to at least ask a question, and Jackie will monitor that for us. If you do have a question and you want to raise your hand, you can do that with the feature there as well. So we will be recording this session so that individuals in the future can have a chance to listen to it and learn a little bit. But we also know that this is going to be an ongoing process. So I'll just start off with some opening remarks. The first is that we stand with you in our great disappointment in some decisions that have been made. We understand that this time is incredibly challenging and there's a lot of uncertainty, and we're just right there with you. I think all of us stand in somewhat exhaustion already, and we haven't even started the new academic year just because we've spent 5 months now in uncertainty and in the midst of challenges, and we want answers and we want to give you the best opportunity possible. And unfortunately, sometimes things don't go our way, and so we're at this point right now where we've got to pivot a little bit. But tonight, our hope is that we can give you as much information as possible. Really, we want to share with you all that we can so that you can be as educated as you can going into the new academic year. We love every one of you very much. We just hope that you can be patient with us. We hope that you can trust us. And we hope that you can continue to communicate with us and your head coaches and assistant coaches, because we're trying to be here in a position to help you and give you all that we can. So as far as tonight's agenda, we'll start off and we'll talk about the decisions that have been made about the fall, winter, and the spring, or at least the fall, and our thoughts about the winter and the spring. Then we'll talk about returning to campus. We'll talk about what instruction will look like. We'll get into eligibility, compliance, and scholarships. So we'll give you some specific information there. We'll talk about screening and then ultimately testing. So it'll be me for a little bit, and then it will be Jackie that will jump in there, and we'll have a chance to dialogue and do as much as we can to get you information. So first and foremost, we know that a couple days ago, the NCAA Board of Directors made the decision to remand any decisions back to the 3 different divisions on what they're going to do for their fall sport championships. And so by doing that, the Division I Board of Directors said, we're going to take a step back. We're going to let Division I, II, and III make their own individual decisions about what they want to do about fall sport championships. The first one out of the chute was Division III. They said ultimately that they were going to cancel the fall sports championships, and that was a real quick, abrupt decision that was made by them. Then a day later, the Division II President's Council came out with their decision, and they decided to do the same thing, where they stated that they were going to cancel the fall sports championships. Their rationale was really the cost of hosting those championships, the protocols that were needed to ensure the safety of student athletes. And they guesstimated that it would cost the NCAA between $5 and $6 million to conduct the testing that would be needed in the fall sport championships to be able to protect those student athletes. So basically what they said is that there'll be no fall sport championships sponsored by the NCAA until the fall of 2021. In doing so, they also stated that their priority was to conduct the spring sports championships and be able to prepare ourselves for those. That is a top priority of the NCAA right now because our spring sports were the first ones to lose their championship season, and they want to make sure they preserve that, but they also want to preserve the winter sports championships as well. We know that Division I has the March Madness, which funds all of NCAA Division I, II, and III with their $1 billion contract. And that basically keeps all of us alive. So they're going to do everything in their power to try to preserve the NCAA Division I March Madness that will come. But in our case, we anticipate that the NCAA is going to make a decision here in the next week or two about Division I fall sport championships. We also anticipate that the NCAA is going to make a decision about winter sports championships in the next month. So they're making the attempt to try to do that quicker than they have in the current situation. So then we take it and we look closer to home. And so the Rocky Mountain Athletic Conference President's Council met just recently and started to look at the decision made by the NCAA. A few weeks earlier, we had already made the decision that we were going to continue on with fall sports and try to continue to participate in those this fall. But when the NCAA came in and said we're going to cancel all fall sports championships, the RMAC decided that we were going to push the fall sports championships to the spring semester of 2021. With that, they put some caveats in there. They said that the sport of men's and women's cross country could compete in the fall if we want to as an RMAC championship experience. And with that, they also said that in the spring, there'll be modifications made to the schedule. And those modifications are pretty significant for each of you because what Jackie shares with you will be all related to you preserving your eligibility for that opportunity to be in a championship season. In addition to the RMAC stating that about fall sport championships being pushed to the spring, they have also left open the door for programs to do some kind of competition in the fall. In doing that, though, they have to meet all of the requirements that are stated by the NCAA with regard to testing protocol. And for us, that's pretty important because we want to make sure that we're competing at schools that are clean and compete against environments that are going to be safe for us. And so we got a lot of work to be able to get to that point, but that door is still open for us. But the fall sports except cross country will ultimately be having schedules developed in the coming weeks here for spring sport or for spring season championship experiences for our student athletes. And Jackie will talk about the number of competitions and how to preserve eligibility and all that kind of stuff. But in addition to the fall sports being pushed, golf and tennis will have the opportunity to start in September and have the opportunity to participate in competition. The reason for that and the reason for ultimately the push to the spring of the fall sports is the contact risk that exists in sports. The NCAA looked at our fall sports and said football, men's and women's soccer, and volleyball are high contact risk sports, meaning that there's rigid testing protocol, meaning that there's a lot of opportunity for the transmission of the coronavirus. On the flip side, cross country was deemed as an intermediate risk sport. Golf and tennis were deemed as low risk sports. And so those sports, because they are technically spring sports in their championship season, they're going to be allowed to do some non-championships competition in the fall to kick things off. And so the piece that we now as an institution have to do, particularly as it relates to the fall sports, is to decide if we want to opt in or opt out. If we want to be a part of the fall cross-country championships, if we want to be a part of some formulation of a scheduling for football, men's and women's soccer, and volleyball. And so those are discussions that we'll have in the coming days here as we ultimately prepare for the upcoming academic year. I'll keep going here because I'm going to transition into CSU Pueblo and closer to home. And again, if there's any questions, feel free to chat it in or raise your hand and we'll pause. But so back to home, the campus is planning on a full return to school on August 24th. There is the combination of face-to-face, online, and hybrid that will take place. We know that students can arrive early between August 17th and the 21st of August. Jackie can give you some more details about that. We also know our international student athletes have that option. It has been stated that the last day of in-person instruction will be on Friday, November 20th. At that time, people will be dismissed for Thanksgiving and essentially won't come back until the second semester. It's unclear at this time what's going to happen with our winter sports and if they'll be able to stay on campus and train and compete, or if they'll go as well. We're still waiting to kind of figure that one out. At the same time, when we start school on the 24th, that's the date when we can start our practices, we'll begin compliance meetings at that particular time. And so we're working on how to situate those. Whether you're a fall sport, winter sport, or spring sport, we have to organize those and provide those opportunities for people so they can learn all they can about the NCAA rules and regulations. We do also have on Sunday, August 23rd, our guest speaker coming in to talk to all of our student athletes like we have in the past. We're looking at doing that in Masari Arena using the big video board and having everybody spaced out. So we're working on those particulars as well. So the notification of all that kind of stuff will come specifically from your head coaches, but we'll have the opportunity to get each of you involved in some early season meetings before we actually get out into some kind of activity that we call our new norm. Okay, so things are obviously different than they've been. Things are going to be very unique, but we are committed to making this the best experience possible. So at this time, what I'd like to do is turn it over to Jackie, and she will talk specifically about the things that are real essential for you to know about eligibility, scholarships, and our position on all these things as you look to the new academic year.
Thanks, Paul, and hi, everybody. Several of you have reached out about questions about this stuff kind of throughout the summer, and so I'm grateful that we've got a chance to come together and have some of these questions answered as a group. Just kind of a general compliance information piece. The normal NCAA compliance forms that you all fill out every summer for me will be coming out soon. The NCAA kind of drug their feet on those. They were reviewing some of the legal language in those forms and things like that. We did just get those on Friday from the NCAA. So one of the things I'm working on is getting that sent out to you all. So that is something that's not going to change. We'll have to do that. We're going to have a couple extra forms to fill out this year, but all of that's going to come through Front Rush just like every other year, and that's going to come out soon for all of you to work on before you're allowed to start practice. So I know it'll be a quick turnaround. I appreciate your help on that, and it is coming soon. From an eligibility standpoint, so incoming freshmen and transfers are going to do essentially mostly the same as they always have done with the eligibility center and transcripts and all of the things that typically happen for our incoming student athletes. Your coaches are your point of contact for those of you who fit into that category. Just make sure you're communicating with them. They've got lists of what needs to get done, what you've already finished, and they've likely been sharing that information with you throughout the summer. But if you're wondering about any of that, your sport coach is your first point of contact for that information. Returning student athletes, everybody who was enrolled as a full-time student in spring of 2020, the NCAA waived all of the normal progress towards degree requirements that we typically have. So I'm usually talking to you every year about the 9, 18, and 24-hour rule and your GPA and all of that stuff. The NCAA has said, let's not worry about that for fall 2020. So those of you who were wondering about how your spring grades will impact you, essentially they will not, as long as we don't have any. If you weren't enrolled in spring, those are things you'll want to check in with your coach and or Sean to make sure that you guys are in the right spot for that. That said, we're going to get back to somewhat of normal through fall. So during fall, we're going to have to go back to passing 9 hours in order to be eligible for spring. So that's going to go back to normal. It's just this one time where all of those rules are kind of tossed out the window. So be prepared for that. Then once we get into our seasons, Paul kind of mentioned there are some modifications to what counts as a season of competition. So you all know that typically the NCAA rules state that you get 4 seasons of competition and 10 semesters in your athletic career in Division II. If we start playing and don't get more than 50% of your competitions in for the season, so that might be games, that might be dates of competition, depends on your sport. The NCAA has said, we can automatically give you your season of competition back if you've competed in, some of those games. So we won't have to file a bunch of waivers if we don't get past the 50% mark of your season. So the good news is we don't have to try to predict the future. We can, use our seasons appropriately and know that if something happens mid-season, we've got some options. The RMAC is considering for those fall sports that just got their championships canceled by the NCAA. We are looking at whether or not we would prefer to just schedule 50% of the competition so that it's not something we have to worry about. Those are ongoing conversations, and I would anticipate we'll have those answers in the next couple of weeks. But at this point, it's just kind of all on the table right now. The athletics administrators are going to mock up some schedules for spring for those fall sports for us to look at, and then we're going to make some determinations in the next couple weeks. So we'll have more information soon on that. With that 50% waiver, in addition to getting your season back for you, you'll also get 2 extra semesters to come back. So we won't have to worry about you running out of that 10 semester clock. Both of those pieces of that waiver, of course, assume that you are eligible to compete. So if you weren't eligible anyways, you can't get those things because you wouldn't have been able to play this year anyways. As far as other academic things, right now, that's the extent of the decisions that have been made. The NCAA also has indicated that their intent is to provide you all with the information regarding eligibility and the flexibility to determine what's best for you in your career. And they've set a deadline of August 14th, so a week from today, to try to make some of those decisions. Certainly I would expect that the NCAA will come out with some more information for us in the next week. But quite honestly, it could be after the 14th as well. We might get some information in the next week and then get some more later. So that's something we'll continue to keep updating you all as we get more information and to help you and your coaches make decisions. Some of you have asked about what does the world look like now that we've moved my sport to spring, so those soccer, football, volleyball athletes. I would say the best way to think about it is likely that your fall 2020 will feel like a spring semester where you participate in your normal non-championship segment. It's likely that it's going to feel very similar to that. We're still working through the details of all of that, and we'll be working with your coaches both, you know, as a group of all the fall sports, but also individually for sport by sport decisions of what practice schedules and things like that will look like. You'll just want to keep in touch with your coaches as far as any of that scheduling stuff goes. And then the other big question that I've been getting is about scholarships. And many of you have noticed that the Board of Governors, excuse me, noted in their decision this week that scholarships are protected essentially from you know, issues surrounding COVID-19. What we are committed to, and really were committed to regardless of what the board said, was that we've offered you scholarships. You all have signed your 2021 scholarships, and our plan is to uphold those. Of course, that means you have to do things too, right? Like follow team rules and follow university rules. The NCAA currently still will also require you to be a full-time student. So if you're not enrolled, we won't be able to pay a scholarship out. But we're not gonna reduce or cancel scholarships if seasons are reduced or canceled, or you know, if COVID-19 interrupts our ability to practice and things like that. So that's something you can kind of take off your list of things to worry about. Certainly if you haven't already signed your scholarship online and you've been getting weekly emails from me asking you to do so, that would be something important. I can't award your scholarship until you've signed it. But once you've signed it, you can be confident that we're going to fulfill our end of the bargain on that. Those were my compliance notes. So I'll pause. I did have one question about playoffs in the spring. So fall sports, those of you who the championship was canceled, Paul answered that a little bit in that the NCAA championship is canceled. So that certainly would eliminate that playoff opportunity. What we in the RMAC are determining is what level of RMAC playoffs will be available for fall sports in the spring. So there may be a form of playoff opportunities depending on you know, what you're looking for in a playoff opportunity that may or may not. Certainly the NCAA playoff opportunity will not exist for fall sports in this academic year, but we will at this point still have RMAC championships to play for. I'm looking at a couple more questions I've gotten here. Paul, I've got a budget one. Are you ready for that question?
Sure, I'm ready.
All right, so the question is, what about next year when sport budgets are depleted?
I guess I don't necessarily understand what that means. Do you know, Jackie?
Let me see if I can get some more information.
So I can share with you that our president has made every intent to ensure that two things are upheld for the 2020-21 academic year. And the first is the full-time employment of our staff. And the second one is to retain the scholarships of our student athletes. And so essentially we have the funding to be able to manage that. What we're now working on is all of the external revenue that we generate, which is about $2 million a year. And that's generated through camps and clinics, corporate sponsorships, through different fundraising events that we do, socials, our endowment, all those types of things are part of that $2 million that we raise. And so obviously ticket sales is a part of that. And we're concerned, you know, that there'll be a decrease in revenue that will be generated this year. But I continue to be reassured from our administration that we will get access to CARES Act money. CARES Act money came from the federal government and has been allocated to each institution. On top of that, the university system has given their commitment to CSU Pueblo and CSU Fort Collins in making sure that we're sustained through this pandemic. You know, and that obviously creates concerns for the 2020-21 academic year, but it can also create concerns for 2021-22. And we're different than Division I. We're subsidized more by our institution than we are by our fundraising. So I feel like we'll have those subsidies and that support. And if we can get through this pandemic and in 2021 see a vaccine or see some better testing protocol in place, I think we'll have a chance to be able to manage this better and be able to generate back some revenue that we may have lost.
And Paul, I was able to get a little clarification. This person was mostly asking about what is this, if we maintain these scholarships this year, and people that we weren't planning to have come back in 2021, 22, what are we going to do about the budget for that?
So at this time, I don't believe we can answer that question, primarily because of two things. One is we don't know yet what our budget will look like for 21, 22, but at the same time, the NCAA only requires us to have 1-year scholarship commitments. And so that's a question that was asked of our head coaches just a week ago or two. And we're still in the midst of trying to figure that one out. I honestly think we're just trying to get to tomorrow versus next year. So we'll probably this fall we'll be able to answer that and have some better clarity so we can guide coaches along the way, because we know student athletes will want to know about 21, 22 as well.
Yeah. Okay, I've got a couple more eligibility questions that have come through. Kind of all in the same vein, but so some of you have maybe just a handful of credits left to graduate, and we're maybe scheduled to graduate this December or even in the spring for some of you that are kind of trying to figure out what 2021, 22 would look like. There's a couple pieces to that. So the normal rule, if you are in your last semester before graduation and say you only need 5 credits to graduate and your degree audit shows that that's everything and then it's going to be time to graduate, there is a specific exception for that. There's a form we have you fill out, and then we're able to let you practice, compete, and receive your scholarship while not full-time. So it's kind of one of the only times you can do those things while you're part-time. But that only applies to 1 semester. And there is also a rule that if you use that exception and then you don't graduate, you kind of mess up your eligibility for the future. So certainly those are things that I would encourage you to reach out to Devine, and she can walk you through the paperwork and confirm that you're in that situation. But then there's kind of that compounded piece of then how do I get to play next year or in the spring if that's something that was on the horizon. Currently, and again, we could get additional flexibility next week from the NCAA, but so what I'm talking about right now is what I know right now, and then I'll certainly update you all if things change as we move towards the fall semester. But so if you were to graduate in December, but you're wanting to be able to practice or compete in the spring or next fall, you have essentially 2 options. One is to apply and get admitted to graduate school. If that's something that you were planning to do or want to do, that's awesome. And we can work through that admissions process. Those students are required to be enrolled in 9 credit hours rather than 12. So grad students are a little bit different that way. If grad school isn't what you were wanting or not something you're wanting to pursue at this time, the other option is to enroll as what we call a degree plus student, which means you're seeking a second bachelor's degree. You do have to reapply as a readmit. It's a really quick and simple process. But those are the 2 ways to then get enrolled. You do have to go back to being a full-time student if you're in that degree plus, so 12 hours per semester. The other option to look at now would be if you want to delay graduation, add another minor, things like that. Sean can help you work through any course scheduling and things like that to make those options. So really that's a case-by-case basis. You'll want to touch base and have us look at your specific degree program and try to get you to where you want to be. Sean, did you have anything to add to that? Awesome. And so then kind of tied into that is what if I just don't want to play, right? So maybe I don't feel comfortable. I'm still going to be in school, but I'm not comfortable playing. Or, some of you fall sport athletes might be thinking, I don't want to play because there's not a national championship opportunity. That is protected through the Board of Governors decision this week. So yes, we will still honor your scholarship. Practice and competition is not contingent upon your scholarship. Again, you've got to follow team rules and stay enrolled and all of that good stuff, but you are not required to play. Somebody asked how to get a hold of Devine. Her email and all that contact information is in our staff directory on gothunderwolves.com. That would be the fastest and easiest way to find that information. That looks like I've gotten all the questions that have been sent to me in the chat. Does anybody else have questions?
So the other area that a lot of our student athletes have been inquiring about is how are we going to provide safety for them as individuals? And this has been something that for literally the last 5 months we've been grappling with and trying to address, because the student athlete safety and your experience is our #1 priority. And so just as of late, Devin Hart, the Director of Sports Medicine, has been put on the COVID management team for CSU Pueblo. So he's involved in all those daily conversations that they're having. At the same time, starting on July 6th, when we began our voluntary workouts on campus, and I know some of you have experienced this, we began the daily screening activity where we have individuals check in, their temperature and wellness are checked, and they're given a wristband to be able to go participate in activity. So that will continue until the Friday before school starts. When school starts on August 24th, that process is going to change, and they're going to be implementing a different self-check process versus a daily screening. The reason for that is that literally it takes 20 of the safety staff to be able to do the daily screening, and it's almost impossible for them to be able to monitor that and be able to continue that when we have 4,000 people on campus. However, one of the things that it is required in intercollegiate athletics is that we will do daily screening. And so as an athletic department, our sports medicine staff will do daily screening of all student athletes before they can engage in any type of activity. And that's basically doing a temperature and a wellness check that we can monitor on our own basis and on our own time. In addition to that, we've already implemented and we will continue to implement regular cleaning and sanitizing. We found that our process and what we're doing is been very effective. We've got a lot of support from our campus to be able to do that, and it's been a good situation so far for us, and we feel like we have a good setup. The area that we've had to modify a little bit lately has been our wearing of masks. Governor Polis came out with a mask order. It's unclear right now how long the mask order will last, but that is definitely in place for all of us, and which means that our coaches will have to wear a mask indoors and outdoors. Student athletes will have to wear a mask when they work out indoors. We're still waiting to get more clarity, especially when our sports do, indoor activity and more specific to their sport versus just the weight room. But student athletes who are outdoors will not have to wear masks. But having the mask on coaches is definitely another level of protection for us. In addition to that, we also have on our campus what's called the PCR rapid antigen test, which is administered by our health services. And this is an antigen test. So the antigen test is a rapid test which allows us to test up to 50 people within an hour. And we can get the results within basically that 15 minutes to 60 minutes. We did do a pilot test of this last week, and we ran over 200 people through our pilot test. We had 0 student athletes test positive for COVID through that process. If we would have had any positive tests through our student athletes, we would have notified those student athletes, and then we would have done what's called contact tracing. And we would have worked with that individual to identify all of the interaction that they've had previous to that. Those people who were exposed to that positive individual would then have been notified and been put in a protocol to help contain the spread to other individuals. This is something that if you watch the news and look around the country, they're seeing this at a lot of schools, and you're seeing this in even as close as Major League Baseball. So quarantine is definitely something that happens to individuals. It's a 10 to 14 day quarantine, depending upon the exposure or even the test results themselves. But the NCAA has set really high, rigid standards for us to follow. And with these, we have to go through a protocol of testing a certain group of student athletes before competition, depending upon the sport and depending upon the level of risk within that sport. So we have to do testing at the beginning of the year. We have to figure out a plan for that. We have to do testing for pre-competition for our student athletes that's in compliance with the NCAA rules. And we have to then monitor it throughout the whole academic year. So there's a combination of daily screening and COVID testing that are all a part of our process for maintaining the safety of our student athletes. One of the things that we will do with the programs that are competing or even are traveling is that we'll ensure that the schools that we're competing against are following the same testing protocol that we are. We're not going to allow us to play against schools that have loose standards or aren't following the same guidelines that we are. We do know that there is the possibility with COVID testing that there can be false negatives. We also know there can be false positives. It's been studied enough now to know that the testing system that we have right now on campus has a possibility of providing what's called false negatives, which means that people could be possibly positive. The other test, the actual straight up PCR test, has a greater likelihood of having false positives. And so our campus has what's called the Quidel's Sophia 2. And that's the machine that we use to be able to do the rapid test. We've ordered another one of those because we want to be able to do the influenza test on that same Sophia 2 machine. We've also contracted to try and get the PCR test so that we can have both tests on our campus. As you know, the country is also doing the same thing, and every other school in the country is trying to do the same thing. So we're competing against a lot of other entities to try to get the testing protocol on campus or the equipment on campus to be able to administer it. But in the meantime, we have a long ways to go. I can tell you that in our conference, there's probably one other school right now that can confidently say that they can test the way we do, or can test at all. We've had two other schools report to us that their machines were taken from them by the federal government. We've had another school that said they've got it on order, but they're not sure when it's going to come. We do have some schools in our conference that have flat out said we are not playing in the fall. They have been very clear about that. And we have other schools where their governor, and particularly in the state of New Mexico, has told them that anytime anybody comes into the state to compete against them, they have to quarantine for 14 days before they can play. So there are obviously external variables that are impacting other schools more so than us. But one question that we've gotten from people is, what is travel going to look like? Well, obviously, we have now 4 of our own Thunderwolf buses on campus. We've ordered another one, so another one is coming. It'll be here probably in the next 2 or 3 months. But we will provide social distancing on our buses. One of the other requirements is people have to be masked while they're on a bus. 1 to a bed is another requirement in hotel rooms, and then encouraging our coaches to do to-go food options or grab-and-go food options instead of sit-down meals or in areas where there's potential exposure. And so these are things that we've been working on for quite amount of time now. Obviously, there's a different mode of operation now that we're not ultimately competing in the fall quite yet. And we've got a ways to go as we work on scheduling and trying to determine our best plan for fall and spring. But that's kind of our plan for the safety of our student athletes. The other thing I'll mention that we've got a couple things going is when you come back to campus, and we hope that everyone will and be active in a good thriving fall semester, even though it'll be a little bit different. But our guest speaker, who will come in August, and all all of our coaches. We will talk specifically about the world that we live in and the social injustice that we have. We will take a deep dive in trying to provide our student athletes with the greatest opportunity to provide a voice so that we can learn from one another, so that we can become a better athletic department and ultimately better human beings. And so that will be another goal of this upcoming academic year as we try to partner together to make it the best year possible. And then lastly is we are creating a website with Q&A that has all kinds of information for you that will be accessible for you to look up different things if you need to, or refer your teammates to or others. We know that obviously there's not all the athletes online right now, but there's going to have to be a load of communication that goes from each other to those individuals or to mom and dad or whomever is interested. So we want to provide as much information as we can to people. So that's kind of all we have for tonight. We're happy to answer any questions anybody has if you want to keep things going.
We've got some more in the chat that I can go through. The first one was, if we work out with the team in the fall, does it use a semester? And really the key to remember is that being full-time is using a semester. However, again, if we don't make it to 50% of the competitions, then you get more semesters back later. So that's why we're looking at that from an RMAC schedule standpoint for the fall sports, to just schedule at 50% so that we don't have to worry about that, and we can just get you all an extra couple semesters to be able to get a quote unquote real season in. That hasn't been decided yet, but we're hoping to have those decisions made before the school year starts is our goal, so that you can make those decisions. But yes, if you're enrolled full-time, you are using one of your 10 semesters at this point. I've got the next question was, are we online? So, and got a little bit more clarity from the student, but so CSU Pueblo is offering a variety of course options, in-person, hybrid, which is a combination of in-person and online. With those online classes, they can be what's called synchronous or asynchronous. Synchronous means you all sit like we are today. This is synchronous because we're all on one Zoom together. Asynchronous generally means you can log in and kind of accomplish different tasks at your own pace. So it's really important that you all are paying attention to your pause. Your schedules are going to show whether or not your course has been switched to online or hybrid if it was originally an in-person course. So you'll want to make sure you look in your class schedule to figure out if you've got to show up somewhere or you need to be on a computer somewhere for your classes. And also then if you're wanting to opt for a particular format because maybe you really want to be online or maybe you really don't want to be online or something kind of in between, you're able to make adjustments to your class schedule as well at this time. We have extended that where you're able to adjust your schedules during the first week of school as well. So you're able to make those changes through pause as long as you don't have any holds. Let's see. Another question is, if we opt out of our sport, are we still responsible for lifting now or work we do on the field or court or whatever? So currently summer is voluntary, so voluntary workouts cannot impact your status with a team. As we kind of mentioned, your scholarship is not tied to your athletic participation. The NCAA has provided that protection. So we want you to engage in what you feel like you're comfortable with, and we're going to do as much as we possibly can to make sure that you're safe and healthy in those environments through masking and extra cleaning and screening and trying to make sure that we separate out different things so that we don't have a whole bunch of people all in one space at one time. But if it is not something you're not comfortable with and you choose to opt out of practice activities, that is something that is permissible and is something that your scholarship would still remain intact if that's something you choose. And then the other question was, can you be part-time in the fall and spring, I think, and then be eligible to play next fall? So if you go part-time, yes, you would save your semesters, but the other side of that coin is that you cannot practice, receive a scholarship, or compete, of course, if you're not full-time, unless we go through that whole exception process. And if that's what you're wondering about, any of you in this meeting or those of you who listen later, those are really important. Just contact us and we'll look through your personal information, because those are really unique to each student. But in general, if you go part-time, it does not count towards your 10 semesters. But you're not able to work out with the team or receive a scholarship in that scenario. Those were the questions in the chat. Does anybody else have questions? We certainly, if you want to unmute and talk, we're okay with that as well.
I know we have potentially coaches online. They're welcome to ask questions too, or even ask us to clarify something if it didn't quite make sense to them.
I did get another question in the chat about spring sports. So specific to practice, and so spring and winter sports are kind of in the same boat right now, right? And normally when you show up in the fall, we're not doing your 15-hour weeks, right? Or your 20-hour weeks where you're in season, quote unquote. So you all start off pretty normal, right? With your 8-hour strength and conditioning, a little bit of practice, doing that. And then the normal time for us to transition to spring practice or fall practice for your spring sports. I'm going to use baseball as an example because it's easier to talk about a sport. But so fall ball for baseball will generally go on as normal. We're working through what we need to make happen in order to do competition in the fall for those sports. But certainly fall practice will be up and running. And we'll be able to, the one difference is that we're going to have you guys hold off until September 1st to start all of that. Just because we need some time to get the fall sports moving. You know, normally they're here before school starts, and so we can get them going before the spring and winter student athletes come in. So the fall sports will start that first week of school, and then winter and spring 8-hour weeks and things like that will start a little bit later than usual, but otherwise it'll be pretty much business as usual as far as practice schedules and things like that. The other question that just came in is, are we required to wear a mask in the weight room? The answer to that is yes. The governor of Colorado has mandated masks in all indoor facilities in the state of Colorado. So anytime you're inside, whether you're working out or just walking down the hall, it is mandatory for everybody to have masks on inside. If we're working out outside, at this point, we're not requiring student athletes to wear those masks for outdoor workouts, as long as you can spread out, of course. Another kind of note in here was, well, what if I know that somebody's not following the rules? And that's an important thing as well. So we certainly want you all to use your voice and feel like you can say, hey, where's your mask? Or, hey, did you forget your mask today? I have an extra one. Or, you know, those sorts of things. Because certainly sometimes we just forgot. Maybe it's sitting on my desk and I walked to the bathroom, right? I've made that mistake in the time we've had our mask mandate on campus. And or speaking up to your coach and saying, hey, I'm seeing this happen. I'm not sure what to do. Can you help me? However, there are some additional protections that are being put into place. One is from the NCAA level, where the board is asking or has required the NCAA to establish a hotline for the national office to receive complaints about COVID-19 specifically. So anybody who is concerned that an institution or a particular team, or you know, down to an individual on a campus, if they're concerned that those people aren't following guidance that has been provided, they can make a phone call and then the NCAA will follow up on that. My understanding is that CSU Pueblo is also working on something similar for our campus, where there would be a way for you to report concerns so that we can address them as quickly as possible. So that is something that's on our radar institutionally and also is happening nationally. Let's see, we got a couple more questions rolling in. So golf is going to go ahead pretty much as normal. That's one question in here. You'll want to communicate with your coach about schedules and things like that. One caveat is you will likely not start practice till September 1 is the one exception to the pretty much as normal there. And I've got one more question in here, but it's pretty specific, so I'm just going to work with that student directly. Anybody else have any questions?
I think for a second there, Coach Riston turned on his camera, so he might have wanted to talk or ask a question. Are you there, Coach?
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that the sport of football, that we can have an opportunity to have our guys participate 50% both in the fall and the spring, because it's really technically a split season. Is that correct?
Well, so we haven't made a determination about what kind of season we're going to have. That's something that's the RMAC is discussing in the next couple weeks. A split season for any of the fall sports is possible. It involves counting dates and splitting the season up and figuring out what we could or couldn't run from a practice standpoint. But that is a kind of middle ground option that the NCAA has provided. We don't know yet where the RMAC is going to land on that possibility.
And I think to couple with that, we know that there are schools that have already said they are not absolutely at all going to do any fall sport competition in the fall. They've already come out and said that. But the schools that are kind of waiting to see are all the ones that have to validate their testing protocol to make sure that every student athlete is safe and that everybody has the same protocol to follow. And then kind of put together. But what makes the whole thing tricky is how to mesh the fall and the spring together and then keep it under the 50% so that eligibility is retained. And the other thing is we don't want to have too many activities in the spring, too many competitions in the spring, because we want our fall sports to be able to have a real fall in 2021 and not be banged up or overused or even injured. Does that answer, Coach?
Yeah, I just think there's some opportunities that we can create a development of this 2020 year, and I want to make sure we maximize that and try to figure out what's best for us here at CSU Pueblo with the validation of the safety of our athletes and making sure that we have that opportunity. So I think you guys have done a great job. I want to continue to grow with this and merge it all together to make a best plan for us.
Yeah, and to piggyback off that, one of the things that I was, during these calls today and during all the issues that we've had to deal with, I was really encouraged today by President Mote. He called me several times and said, hey, what can we do as a university to support athletics? And how can we help athletics? And what can we do to support what's going on for our student athletes? And so they want to meet with our head coaches next week and have a conversation as a university leadership team and our athletic department head coaches and say, hey, what can we do to support you? And even vice versa, so that we can make this the best experience possible for our student athletes and really make it a great environment for people to want to be.
Awesome.
Okay, so thank you all for being with us tonight. We'll hold steady for a couple more weeks, and we look forward to seeing you all. Please don't ever hesitate to reach out if you have questions or concerns, if you need anything from us. We're happy to be of support and help at any time. So.
And there was one more question that came in about housing. I would just say in general, so mask mandates in housing. We talked a little bit about move-ins from housing and things like that. If you have questions specifically about the residence halls, just make sure that you are contacting them and reading the information that they send you all. I do not know the ins and outs of masks in the residence halls, but your RAs and your housing staff are going to be the experts in that area.
Okay, thank you, coaches. Thank you, student athletes. Thank you, administrative team. We look forward to seeing you all in a few weeks. Go Pack.
All right, bye everybody.
Thanks.